Welcome to the Education Corner, a podcast by Education Choices magazine.
We're thrilled to welcome you, Dr. Jo Spence from Dulwich College, to our Education Corner podcast, and are looking forward to chatting a bit about Dulwich College. To begin, would you like to tell us a little bit about the ethos at Dulwich College?
Oh, Chloe, thank you. Delight to be filling a niche in Education Corner. A real treat to talk to you too. Yes, I mean, isn't ethos such an interesting thing these days? There's such a stress, I think, being on more explicit about it. And we're joining that. We like that challenge, really, that's given by parents now to absolutely defining it. I mean, I'd start by saying that we, for a long while now, have had almost the twin pillars of, if I can call it this, I've been in post now 12 years plus, it's my Dulwich, is a social mission and an educational vision. So really proudly able to launch in and say that the first thing is wanting to be a school of inclusivity. I know a lot that we talk about later will relate to inclusion, to diversity, but I'd start there. And when I say that, I mean wanting to be a school of access. We have 200 boys on bursaries at the moment, 150 of those or so are on full bursaries, and we like the idea of being the school to which people can come for that socially transformatory fee relief. I believe that that's bought into by all our parents, and that they are with me in wanting to push towards what will probably be a needs-blind future. And I suppose I'd say, and this is something I'm sure we'll talk about later, I could well imagine being sector-wide eventually. But there's first of all that sense of what do we want to be? We want to be a school of and for our community with access that is to as great an extent as possible, not defined by the ability to pay the fee. And then the educational vision has taken shape over those years too. Yes, we're still a school that you must only choose if we believe we do well by your children in getting them the best results possible, but there is so much more to education than that. And so the vision is based around a phrase I used, I think for the first time about 8 years ago, to my then Deputy Master academic, Al Kennedy, now leading Trinity, where I just came up with the phrase free learning. Isn't what we do at our best is when we go beyond the test, beyond the classroom, beyond the syllabus, and love offering free learning free of those things, free of the constraints of examinations and grades and marks and places. And I suppose I thought it might be one of those sound bites that came and went. Initially, there was when Al said, let's make something of it. Let's do the one side of A4. Let's go public with the common room. Let's let you start using that phrase with prospective parents. Would it have come and gone? Cynicism at first from teachers. They hate playing to sound bites. They're very wary of anyone who's so fluent with words that that's what it becomes. But wonderfully over time, I'd say that not a week goes by now when I do not have a conversation that relates to one of my staff coming and talking about their latest initiative. The free learning day we want to do, the off-syllabus week, the symposium. And this is where we really now know it's embedded. It's that sense of, no, it's not only something for which there are special days. There is a thread of it going through all classes. So when we changed our lesson time for 35 minutes to 55 minutes, one of the main reasons for that was let's allow breathing space within lessons. That red herring that you've had to have closed down is actually so valuable. Let that conversation that was supposed to simply be about X become about Y as well. And that defines us as educationalists. And then out of the great social revolution, I'm going to call it that we are living through, exacerbated by a global fragile situation and of course by the constraints of COVID and suddenly being pushed back into isolated living and worrying about that. All of the things that came out under that have led us to look to be more explicit about things such as, if you look at our website, we have a page which shows our ongoing response to all issues relating to race and gender, and our promotion of all peoples equally in valuing them is our equity and respect page of the website. And I suppose that sense of the search for equity, we are not there yet any more than any institution. The sense that all must be respected, the sense that we have to work even harder than we would once have done to make sure that this is a place where prejudice cannot exist. Prejudice is a human condition, but that the messaging is such that people understand why you've got to be so careful. We want to respect all traditions, and they are therefore the components of the evolving ethos of Dulwich College, a school of access, a school dedicated to a social mission, a school with a very strong sense of what it does as educators offers to people through its education, and a sense of a commitment to our place in social change.
Fantastic answer. How do you feel being, obviously you are very much an all-boys school, helps the boys with their academic success? What do you feel the benefits are?
Lovely. Thank you, Chloe. I'm not sure it helps them nor hinders them with their academic success. I mean, it's a fascinating question. If you'd have asked me 14 years ago if I'd be leading an all-boys school, I'd probably have said no. As much as personal background matters, I'll give a little epitome of that. I mean, I came into teaching by accident. I remember telling my amazing mentor, Eric Anderson at Eton College, where I arrived to teach for one term only, that I didn't intend to be a teacher. I wasn't sure I believed in independent education. I hadn't had any exposure to it before, but that I loved the idea of just celebrating my love of history in the classroom for a little while. And I had 10 very happy years there, became relatively swiftly master in college, looking after the King's Scholars, found my vocation, and realized that my love of the arts and sport and journalism and clubs and societies and the pastoral side that I really didn't think I would particularly take to just fulfilled me so much. And then it was actually probably Eric and his wife Poppy, a real power with the throne rather than behind the throne, who suggested to me, you would enjoy headship. That made me look at Oakham School when Tony Little became head of Eton, and I went there for 7 very happy years. And I guessed the minute I left, I'd have thought co-ed is the future. I feel very naturally taken towards that. I loved running a school for boys and girls. And yet, at the risk of sounding a bit pious, just towards the end of that, when Dulwich made an approach and said, would you come back? I knew at some time I'd want to be back in London. I love London, the world of the galleries, the museums, the libraries, the theatres, the music. That's my absolute passion, that I'd come back. But I didn't expect to come back so soon. But Dulwich just told a particular story. And as I say, at the risk of sounding pious, I loved the idea of what I happen to know about what I believe boys need in a school. And I suppose the only frustration I found at Oakham, brilliant co-ed school though it was and is I was having to do so much social engineering to get boys to audition for the play, boys to stay in the choir. I mean, I think now there's a real tradition that this has grown and grown and grown in a wonderful way. But that actually in an all boys setting, of course, you don't have to think about that. You actually have boys for whom it's cool to be in the choir, doing the house poetry competition, engaging in language translation, all the things that there can just be that sense in a co-ed setting that the gender stereotyping of subjects and in that awful British way in the two cultures of the arts and the sciences can take hold. So I often pitch it notably to our prospective parents as if you want your boy to carry on reading, to carry on loving, performing through those very difficult adolescent years, often having them on their own when they mature a little less swiftly than the girl, means they still have the confidence in each other's company with that lovely little edge of competition, often through the house drama competition, music competition, whatever it might be. You can actually encourage them forward in that way. I guess later we'll get more onto, but there must be co-ed opportunities. And with all of our local schools, state and independent, as well as our sister schools, Alleynes and Jags, every day now. Again, further motivated. I hate that overuse of a phrase like silver lining, but out of the issues that have come to light has come an absolute determination that we must do more together, mustn't we? Absolute belief in that. But just that residual belief that for now at least, never say never in the present world, the boy-only classroom can still work. I don't think boys learn that differently. There's lots of neuroscience about the differences. I wouldn't want to overemphasize that. I'd simply say that what we've created is a space in which boys can learn in a way that seems to befit how they like learning. And that can be everything from kinesthetic, where they love movement and space, and that can be allowing them to become passionate. I mean, I think here is the risk of gender stereotyping, but I suppose I'd say my Oakham experience gives me some right to dare to suggest that I've seen that case of the very brilliant girl whose brilliance is expressed by an ability to hear through those adolescent years and respond to exactly what that question demanded, versus the equally brilliant boy who somehow, and is this nature and nurture, it's not for me to say, will not obey the rules. We'll be told to do A, B, and C, and we'll do A, B, and D, A, B, and F, because he wants to. He'll be told to write 500 words, and he'll write 800 and get 10 minus 1 because you didn't fulfill the rubric, and be really angry with that because he's done more and he did what he wanted to do and he's passionate about it. But there's that, I suppose, in an all-boys setting, you can allow that to an extent and then reel it in as you are teaching exam preparation, how you must answer the question as set, and all of those things. So as you can tell, and as I always lead, Chloe, when talking to prospective parents, I have not created a school with passionate advocates of single-sex education. We are here, it works. We're looking for wonderful ways in which to work with schools in different settings, one of which, of course, is to work with co-ed and single-sex schools. But there's still something that means you can help these 1,800, or given Dux is co-ed, so the 1,500 young boys and young men and people who arrived here with that as their definition and now want to question it by having an atmosphere which plays to their learning needs.
Lovely. And I imagine that there is quite a lot of mixing with the girls. You've got some fantastic schools on your doorstep that it must be part of everyday life. What is Dulwich College's commitment to the diversity and inclusion? Have you taken steps since the BLM movement and the different things that have all been happening globally? Has it changed your approach at all?
It really has, Chloe. You said and then almost parked, but I'd love to deal with it on the back of what I just said, the relationships with local schools. So I'll say a bit about that because I think it will lead in actually then to talking about our commitment to equity, to diversity, to inclusion, and understanding the different things that they mean and where maybe the greatest emphasis has to be put and the greatest work has to be done. So on the links with local schools, yeah, absolutely delighted. I used that phrase a few minutes ago that not a week passes without the latest free learning initiative in or beyond the classroom. And not a week passes when, and indeed we have a dedicated team and leaders at the moment looking to, notably with James Allen's Girls' School, our number one sister school within the foundation, and the Girls' School meeting with us as the boys' school in the foundation of 3 schools, of which Allane's is the co-ed school. Not a week passes when we're not looking to new occasions. So just before we came on air, I was saying to you, we had a junior school forum last night. How lovely to lead the junior school forum, where many parents were asking questions about what co-ed opportunities. By saying at the end of this half term, we're just about to have our first junior schools orchestral concert between the 3 schools. We've always done those things at the higher level. We have a joint choir now of the girls of JAGS and the boys of DC in a formal chapel setting of a chapel choir. We've always had our surplus choir. We now have the co-ed choir as well. Lots of other opportunities for playing music together, classical and contemporary, but loving the idea that that's going further down now, that if anything's come out of our learning of the last 2 years, it's all very well having the school plays, middle school and upper school done together. It's all very well having the older children spending an afternoon together on what we call a liberal studies or A-level plus program of electives together, taught between the 2 schools, taught by teachers from the 2 schools, sometimes together. Great to have all of that happening for the 13 plus, the 16 to 18, but the sooner work begins, the better. And what I'm loving now is that things that might once have been, oh, look what Dulwich does, and there are girls with it, has now become absolutely joint. So without taking up too much of our time on all of these examples, let me offer a sort of pertinent case study. It leads neatly, I think, into the D&I point, certainly when we talk about gender. And that is that 4 years ago, after many invitations and a hope that this could happen, the girls of JAGS came and in 24 a year group joined our CCF, our combined cadet force. And we've now reached that lovely stage where 4 years in, of course, girls who originally joined as the new recruits and the ordinary cadets are now the officers of this. So for the first year this year, I've been able to go out, study on at 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock on a Tuesday evening and not find, oh, isn't this great? We've got girls with the CCF, but see girl officers running little troops of year 9, year 10, Dulwich and JAGS girls. And I suppose I offer that as the case study I'd want to draw attention to, because that's probably the first time we've formally had girls and young women in leadership roles within something run by either of the schools. It's happened sort of informally before in societies. The Equality Society, for example, here I'm segueing into the next question, grew literally out of the visit of Laura Bates of Everyday Sexism to talk to our staff at Dulwich College, operational and teaching, about casual sexism, passive sexism, inherited sexism, the sort of example I used again at the Junior School Forum last night, because this is an inset that's constantly referred back to, even though it happened sort of 4 years ago or so, was, the older male teacher acknowledging that his mock chivalry probably has no place anymore. He's still courteous. There is no death of chivalry, but you don't sort of do the false bow as you hold the door open. You hold the door open as you would for anyone, but you don't make too much of it. And that sort of nuanced understanding, I think, is absolutely key. So the next thing that happened at a Laura Bates visit is actually bringing the prefects of Dulwich and Drags together. And that day, once they'd heard her, they set up an Equality Society that became a really good debating chamber over the next couple of years, until lockdown, in fact, where issues relating to gender and discrimination and identity were dealt with between the two schools in a really lovely way. But that was the older pupils getting hold of this. And our duty now, and if time allowed, I'd be able to give, I honestly think, probably a dozen more examples of, let's call them interventions into the single sex setting that we're really promoting within the two schools. So Chloe, picking up from there, diversity and inclusion, I use that phrase, we're living through a social revolution. And in a way, I suppose my duty is to make sure that good comes of it and that we're an evolving institution that's ready for the challenge. So what we found is that certainly if we take the two staging posts, the fact that it is tragic that it needed a publicized tragic death to lead to the coalescing of forces behind this is not good enough. So the death of George Floyd, 2020, really did lead to the Black Lives Matter movement taking on a new vibrancy, a new energy, a new, may I dare call it, a new confidence to come to institutions and say, you think you're doing things, you're doing them in the foothills, but you're not doing enough and you're not doing them fast enough. So the way it's changed our behaviors here is an absolute change from ignorantly using language like colorblind. Dulwich is a very diverse community. Look at our young people. Look at our pupils. And we're color, creed, and class blind. We want to be this school of access, to realizing, no, there's a patronizing note in that. There's a pretending there's not an issue there. If you talk of color blindness, because it's sort of on a chessboard, makes a check situation. You don't go there because you've said it's not an issue. Now we talk very much of color consciousness, wanting to be respectful of all traditions and listen to the lived experience of our pupils, of our teachers of color. And suddenly, once you do that, opening the door. I hope I never did, but I know there was a sort of rhetoric around, what a shame there are no black male teachers particularly, out there that would come here. It doesn't need much. It needs a slight change to how you advertise, a slightly different look at your long list, a growing spreading of the word that we are open, and the very fact of what has changed globally and nationally, that just means we're getting more applications from people who probably once thought, they probably wouldn't look at me, from that university, with that background, from that schooling. And now everyone's been empowered to believe they should look at me, whether it's that they're looking at me because they want to, or because it's enlightened self-interest, or because they feel they must. I will be looked at. And that has transformed things. And the result has been that in an incremental way rather than any other way, and I wouldn't yet say we're a fully diverse community when it comes to staff or governors, there's been substantial progress in that sort of way. And how within Chloe? Well, the establishment of a Diversity and Inclusion Alliance, a group of pupils and teachers and operational staff with some input from parent advisors, often working in this space, people like the leaders of the African Caribbean Education Network or the FLAIR impact surveys that look at where you really are in race and what your community says you are, where you are in terms of literally the numbers. Again, I think before this, I'd have confidently said, yes, our numbers are pretty good, but we're not a measuring school. And now you can't get away with that. And it's good to be held to account to say, no, honestly, where does it lie? And what is people's perception still of where prejudice exists, whether they've experienced it, how they think we're going about dealing with it. So the work of the Alliance, and then a forum, which means that every form within the lower school and above has its form representative who comes to a given forum on diversity and inclusion issues and talks about those. And then I talked about our free learning days, weeks, months, and one of the most important of those has probably been Dulwich College Identity Awareness Month, which we ran this year for the third time. And it's a chance in the month of February for everyone just to look at and celebrate the multiple identities that go to defining them. It began thinking of race, but it's gone way beyond that to incorporate gender questions, sexuality questions. We know again where we're probably on less secure ground is, have we done enough in terms of able-bodied and people who have protected characteristics in respect of disability? Do we need to think more carefully about opening doors there the way we have in other areas? And the great thing about something like the Identity Awareness Month is literally in the month that David Lammy published his book Tribes, having him come and give a wonderful talk to all of the community about what I've just called those multiple identities, how to celebrate being more than singly defined, because that, of course, is the greatest way to defeat fundamentalism. Because if you are accepting that you yourself carry more definitions than the one pure characteristic that might be celebrated or become a danger to you, you're open to that. And that's a very broad brush answer, but the sorts of progress that we're making in Black History Month this year was very important. I used to be very scathing of it as tokenistic, and a number of our pupils of colour or teachers of colour would have been with me on this. We don't actually make a lot of it because we're worried that, should it be for 1 month only? What's that saying? Do we not want to do more work to look at the curriculum, to embed things more? But I'd now say, we've changed our focus on that. To me, it is just a trigger, and we introduced it as this is a trigger. This is the trigger in November for the rest of our work this year. It isn't about tick, we did Black History Month. And I think I'll just end this part of my answer with relation to race, Chloe, by saying I really love the sort of definition we've given to this work. This year, our work on Black History Month was on adding to history at a time when there's so much fear of cancel culture and what shouldn't be done. I suppose in a very Dulwich way, I'm sitting at the moment in a very traditional old Victorian building that bespeaks a very traditional liberal education. But I'm looking out at our laboratory, our new faculty for science, but home for the arts. And I'm sensing that balance between old and new, tradition and innovation is really key. And what I loved about the adding to history tag was that, yes, we will be doing more Black history from Benin kingdoms onwards. We will be looking at our syllabuses, our curriculum. We'll be lobbying with exam boards as to how fast can they change. But we will be looking to add to rather than cancel. It's not Shakespeare or the latest writers. It's not the canon or let's break the canon and start again. It's Shakespeare plus, it's the canon plus. Let's not give up on what has served so well, but let's add to it. And then if I may, at the risk of this having to be a shorter answer, but really happy to take supplementary questions if you have them on it. How then did we progress once a year later, the death of Sarah Everard led to the generalized Me Too movement becoming very explicitly here in schools in this country, starting in London and starting really, I suppose, with the day schools of London and boys' schools in and around London, the Everyone's Invited movement led by Soma Sara. And then we had to look at questions of, how have we progressed in terms of gender equity? What have we really done in that space? And by extension then, because very much on the back of that, LGBTQ plus pupils would come on board and say, and the abuse or the harassment or the ongoing banter that goes on in this world is still there. It might be more subliminated than it used to be, but not enough has happened to change. And that's where we've moved towards having 3 strands of our diversity and inclusion work. One is racial equity, one is LGBTQ plus rights, and the third is gender allyship. And I use that phrase very particularly. We did start calling it gender equity and then found that really as a boys' school, what are we honestly saying about what we can do in that space? Is it not far more that our job is to be allies? And that leads very neatly into trying to educate the boys to realize that feminism is not about women versus men. It's not a girls' issue. It's something where as allies who must listen rather than tell what you can do. It's very powerful to move forward in that space. And that's where we are at the moment. I've talked about everyday sexism. We also had a brilliant whole school inset for teachers, so teacher training going on from a body called Gendered Intelligence, just making us think about language. And again, recruitment, retention, looking after people who want you to think carefully about the gender question. And then going on from that, Soma has been here. She's talked, in fact, to a body of, I haven't had her talk yet to the full pupil body, but I'd love her to, though I know she's very wary of taking up too many invitations and sort of, again, just appearing on the tick list of a school that can say that they've had her in. But what we did with Soma is bring her to a conference that is hosted among about 12 pretty big independent schools of different definitions, co-ed, single-sex, boarding day, and have her talk about the work of Everyone's Invited to them and how she would hope to educate them towards what she means when she uses a phrase like rape culture. What she's still finding is coming out of notably young women, but sometimes other constituencies too, talking about how we need to move to make abuse absolutely untenable within our institutions as much as we can. And then in addition, I haven't talked a lot about the role of parents, but I must say in this, over these last 2 years, the support of parents towards please use us. Let's almost look at the contract again to what should be happening at home to back up what you're saying at school has also been so very, very important.
Where do you believe you've made the most progress?
I think equal progress, and I'm glad you put it that way, Chloe, because I'll give a shorter, sharper answer this time and say this is absolute proof of work in progress rather than great advances. I'd say we've probably made equal progress in 3 things identified. 1, changing the curriculum, working with the pupils. Pupil voice is very big here, pupil voice to pupil action, but also dedicated teachers. We have our acting head of diversity and inclusion very much going from department to department, asking them, where are they? What help do they need? What changes may come? What do you do already? Very important to ask that question first. So the curriculum question will go on almost over a sort of 3-year cycle of looking to constantly refresh. Recruitment, as you can tell, I'm happy with the progress being made in recruitment to mean that when I said I used to say we're a very diverse school and what I meant we're a very diverse pupil body, I can now honestly say we're a more diverse staff body and a more diverse governing body. But there is still work to do, not again in a tick box way, but in terms of making sure that we reap the benefits of diversity. Diversity is not something you do for minorities. Diversity is about why it's best for the institution as a whole. So advances there. And then in that dialogue with the pupils as to how they feel themselves, how they're heard, how they're listened to. Mentoring schemes beginning using old boys and people of color, people of given sexualities or gender descriptions now coming back and being role models for, supporters for the pupils. So in those 3 areas, I suppose I'd say I see some advance, but in no way do I feel we're anywhere near yet where we should travel to. And of course, I suppose I'd say that we've made this the focus for our talk today. I could be on a call and you might have asked me to talk about sustainability, and I'd tell you we're on that similar stage of journey. Where is the time going to come to do all of these things properly? I think, I've said we're re-strategizing now. We come out of this period of recovery and realignment post-COVID. I think we've got another 2 years of strategizing to make what would probably be a 5-year plan towards where we really want to be. And I think the importance of planning is it gives you time to breathe instead of be faced by why have you not yet. So I want to keep all of these streams moving equally. I wouldn't say we've made more advances in one than the other, and I'd see that as a healthy thing. And I suppose the other strand where I hope I'm not kidding myself, where we've made progress, is that initially, I think in all these areas, there was an innate cynicism among pupils, perhaps parents. I picked it up less from parents, more from teenage children. Are you doing this because you've been made to do it? No, it's a journey we were on before. The speed with which we have to do it is what's changed. We were always in a liberal institution looking to move in these ways, but we didn't spend enough time thinking about it, strategizing about it, taking actions, finding the low-hanging fruit. And now that's why we're focused on this. But I think when we come out of COVID properly, every institution needs a pause for thought and then honestly declare to its community, according to its setting, what it's going to do first, what it's going to do over time, and why it's not going to do some things. So I'm talking to you literally days ahead of the publication of the independent review we had on Dulwich College behaviour, culture, safeguarding. That will land very differently with different parents, different old boys, different pupils, according to what they thought they would find out of that. But that too we will use as there'll be literally 140 recommendations out of that, many to do with policies, many to do with a foundation coach service and how that should be run, many to do with curriculum, notably wellbeing curriculum, many to do with iconography. You've said it, you're sitting in a big Victorian building that looks like a masculine building. So what do you do within it? And what do you do to offset it in a changing world? And these are the issues. So some progress in a number of areas, a need to define where we can really push forward more swiftly. I think I'm really proud with our work with external agencies. I think I'd add that. Not something we can do for ourselves. So loving working in partnership with and being quoted in partnership with a number of organizations getting some national heft in this area, but only work in progress.
I think also a lot of it is reaching out and having people coming in and talking about their experiences. It enables you to approach your own thinking and therefore the thinking of the school as a whole, and things that perhaps had been issues that you wouldn't have addressed had they not been highlighted.
I think that's beautifully put, Chloe, because I think what that makes me return to is, we talked about partnership schools, but of course for Dulwich, equally important as being part of a foundation or having other brilliant local schools like Sydenham Girls, who we work with so closely, Sydenham High School in that case mainly, is our state partner schools. I'm very proudly co-director of the Southwark Schools Learning Partnership, which has 18 schools, 14 state schools, 4 independent schools. We go beyond Southwark now. We're just at that moment of wondering whether we use the long-standing, now 15-year history of the Southwark Schools Learning Partnership or acknowledge that we're really now almost a South and East London group, because we have partners in Westminster and in Lambeth, and many wanting to join us who just say there's nothing like this around us, can we join? And our work with them, we learn as much from them as partners of equal weight as we do from our independent schools. So last term, for example, just as a little sort of aside, I was supposed to be having a sabbatical. My staff talk about my anti-sabbatical because I didn't really get away. But I was supposed to be going to Antarctica in the footsteps of our most famous old boy, Sir Ernest Shackleton, but that got cancelled for COVID. But instead, and what I would have actually fitted in when I got back last term in a sabbatical anyway, was a visit to all our partner state schools to really drive home there are things you can do for us. Sometimes they feel. One school I walked into, the meeting as I walked in was apology that, we take so much from SSLP, we don't give enough to it. And I said, no, that's not the point. We do love when our state schools can host. It's easy for us to host, but you don't learn much from being a host. Everyone can behave well on their home track. I want our boys to go out. I almost want them to giggle and get it wrong somewhere and have to have that addressed and learn from it. But I was in the middle of this school that said, didn't think it could do much. And I met this teacher who created 80 physics lessons on TikTok that are absolutely brilliant. And she must bring that to the partnership. That's the single most innovative idea I met in 20 school visits last term. And yet that feeling sometimes that, you're the big independent school and you can do so much. And there is that danger that a few crumbs from a rich table is not partnership. It's nothing. You've got to move from outreach to a mutual partnership where there's real equal benefit. But, there is a teacher who will lead next year's Southwark Schools Learning Partnership Science Week out of that school, not led from here. And that's the sort of partnership work. And you nicely said, at the beginning, you felt that Dulwich was a school in its community, of its community. And that's one of the ways that I really want that to be the case. So when I talked social mission from an access point of view, it's also that from a partnerships point of view.
I'm slightly digressing here, but disabilities, is that something that you're also looking at as part of the inclusivity?
It is, Chloe, not in a deep set way, but in a way that I suppose I'd say I'd use this as a chance to say to people, if one reason you might have thought, not Dulwich, it's so big or whatever, come and tell us your story and let's see what we could do. We have had pupils with many disabilities, be it hearing or sight or physical disability or mental conditions of various sorts, and being able to find ways to make it work here and believing that there would be a strength in being able to do that, or to say why we couldn't. But I'd really want to address that. So it's almost, if it doesn't feel like a crude way to put it, an advert to let us explore. We don't get that many applications that show us where we could be, but a bit, as I said, about the finding of teachers of colour. Sometimes it's simply because you just haven't asked. So as we look forward, everything from our disability accessibility plan, which sometimes are challenged, we've run that event. Was the ramp sufficient? Did we think of that? Are we planning that lift for that new building? All of these things are much on our mind. And I just see it, I suppose, as the next area into which we really ought to work. And I'd love to be on the front of that rather than simply being reactive. But as so often, and I don't think institutions should be embarrassed by this, you react. If you're a good reactor, you react when there's something you must do. And this is an area that we haven't been exposed in, but that I would be very keen to explore where we can stand and to learn from other institutions about that. And again, on my local visits, as you can imagine, I've picked up a lot of best practice that comes from the state sector as well as from our independent school partners.
Moving on to bursaries and admissions, you've mentioned already you've got 200 children on full bursaries, which is a phenomenal amount. But how many do you tend to offer, say, in an intake of 11 plus? And how would a parent and their child be able to find out about their eligibility?
No, thank you. Thank you, Chloe. I mean, over 200 bursaries of any weight, of which about 140 plus are full fee bursaries at the moment. And we're mainly looking for those transformatory bursaries of 100, or you'll understand what I say if I say 110%, where we realize that in some situations, if that child is going to come to us and benefit from the trips and expeditions and might need help with a uniform or travel or whatever, then that can be provided too. It's means tested. It's very strictly means tested. I mean, we can talk about having over 30% of boys on some form of fee relief, but a lot of that still remains what I'd almost call the residual scholarship monies. We are in a very competitive market. We do benefit from getting people of excellence as role models, academically or musically or sportingly or in art. They tend to be the skills that we focus on. We haven't expanded that. Sometimes I'm asked, what about a DT scholarship or drama scholarships? We care deeply about these things, but we actually think it's too early to make those judgments. There is a sense that the nascent musician can probably be judged, particularly the prodigious musician, by 11 or 13. They may lose it, and we're very good at adapting later to, you hold the award while you want to hold the award. And there is no disgrace if suddenly you'd never played, you'd never swum before you got here, but suddenly you become one of our ace swimmers and you want to be there putting all of your focus into that. So you're no longer going to hold the music award. We're very happy to adapt on that. But the academic awards, in the sense that they're awards as bursaries, mean this, that there is means testing very clearly expressed on the website. Very sensitive to people who may have some capital but be cash poor, and that being the change in London of late. Very sensitive to the fact that this isn't a pseudo scholarship scheme. What I've probably changed in recent years is we're not talking about bursaries going to an absolute academic elite. And sometimes with our old boys, I have to be very careful to make sure I am not looking to the replication of Dulwich as a school that had 60 Oxbridge scholarships in the 1960s, and why can't it return there? Because we're in a different world. I'm talking about access, and if I may use the language of the moment, leveling up. If a child passes our exams, we would look to find them a place, if we could find them, the financial support to get here. So it isn't a pseudo scholarship stream. It brings us many, many bright young people, some of whom win scholarships too. And then we'll factor how much lies with the scholarship and how much lies with the bursary. And the bursary is reassessed annually, but in a sensitive way, a meaningful way, a way that really does make sure that we're not being abused in the use of our charitable funds, but that is careful. And we want that to grow. And I must say, I have a body of parents and of old boys ensuring that we're a school that's raising more than £1 million a year for bursaries. And that is explicitly for bursaries. That in our benefit of being in the Dulwich Foundation and getting monies from the Dulwich estate, we have another £1 million coming from there. We still substantially have to top that up with whatever we can make in a given year. So every parent at Dulwich, in a sense, knows that they also are supporting this, that they have bought into a school where they know that there's a virtuous circle here. They want to be in a diverse school. This is how it becomes the diverse school that I'm honestly going to say to you, I feel 90% of the parents who are here don't feel they've been wooed into that without realizing they know they're part of a social mission. They're part of a social engagement, social mobility and social amelioration. This is a better way to go forward. Only on Monday night, one of our governors kindly hosted a dinner for certain parents who could make a difference in this sphere. And the warmth for this messaging, that is coming through there is great. And I said earlier, I sort of hinted that this is a Dulwich story, but is it only a Dulwich story? I mean, it's a crazy time to be playing futurology games. But I honestly do believe that the future, in spite of the way that, certainly is in a forum where I'm talking to independent school parents and prospective independent school parents, if we're coming, as I sense we might be towards the end, I'd love to leave them with this message that, the rhetoric of media headlines can so often seem to be the independent sector has no friends, it's going to be increasingly isolated, it's classist, it's a thing of the past. And yet, behind the scenes, there are so many little points at which, through the return of the work of the Sutton Trust and pushing again for open access schemes, whereby schools with heft would be encouraged to become schools that say 33% of children on full fees, 33% of children on some fee relief, 33% of children on full fee relief. The work of Springboard and Spring Forward in putting into boarding school settings children from very disadvantaged background, and just the beginnings of suggestions that we could work with virtual schools, we could work with local authorities on this sort of work, is actually showing that I think things might be, at the same time as what the media seems to be interested in, working towards what I'd almost describe, to use another word of the moment, a hybrid future where the independent and state schools actually come closer together. And that there is some sort of moment at which, not in the way it used to be in the fruitful 50s and 60s, when everyone was putting money into grants and education and access for all, but some limited assisted places scheme that allows a school like Dulwich, sitting on a foundation that we sit on, to do more because the state will play a tiny part, maybe only with the very vulnerable looked after children, maybe only in a boarding setting. But once you've opened a door there, you've opened a door to why should not everybody in some degree of need move that way forward? So one of my predictions for the future would be a state and independent schools actually coming together, are wondering whether the state really can pay for education to the degree it would love to. A sense that what are the multi-academy trusts, but in a way, use of third parties, use of often corporate philanthropists who've put money in to make these schools what they're becoming. And surely there's a case of calling on us, and certainly in my, if I may call it this, lobbying within the independent sector, from the ISC and HMC onwards, I'd want that to be thought of as a thread worth pushing on. And instead of the us and them divide, that of course makes the great tabloid headline, do you know what? Behind that, there's far more going on that says we all want the same thing. We all want access to be as broad as it possibly can be. We could work together towards that. And if we believed that there could be a state sector that could honestly, on its own, without any third party, provide for every child in this country what we believe every child in this country has a right to have, then we could go back to it. But that's not where we're starting, and that's not the reality. The reality is you have schools that increasingly, perhaps I may dare say, led by people who want this to be the agenda and who will take some short-term sacrifices. Does it mean the end of the arms race of buildings? And I mean, I'd even go this far, explaining to common rooms, to staff, why we're not quite paying what X might pay, because we have other responsibilities that you bought into because you told me at interview you want to work at Dulwich because of our social mission and our commitment to free learning. It doesn't come from nowhere. It doesn't come without a cost. And so that's a very broad brush answer to what you asked, is the passionate answer I want to give.
We had Professor Lee Elliott Major in the last edition talking about social mobility, and it's obviously something that is a concern to so many with the current situations that we're in. And it's wonderful to hear that Dulwich College is so invested in this way. But just a final question, because I know you're a very busy man. I know that it's not possible to give a sweeping answer on this one, but just for the parents who listen to the podcast, what sorts of qualities is it that you're looking for in boys that join Dulwich College?
Oh, thank you, Chloe. I mean, I fear the first thing has to be, we've talked so much about inclusivity today, but the first thing has to be about exclusivity or selectivity. We are an academically selective school. Boys are coming in the top 15%, maybe top 20% if we really believe they'd thrive here, access the curriculum and do other things. And I suppose, having said the do other things, please, please, please don't think that just because as you go along the South Circular, you see a run of rugby fields, that it's all about sporting Elenians. It's not. You can be a very quiet, modest, non-sporting boy and absolutely thrive here, finding your oasis in the art rooms or with music or in the library or in your clubs and societies, often quite esoteric, which you set up for yourself with your friends, either in your year group or between year groups. But I sense for all that, as I say, very quiet, reserved boys, very much meek boys rather than hearties, but there's a doing gene. There's a sense that come and make the most of being at Dulwich. It can be supracurricular, it can be intellectual, but that sense of do. I think one of the jobs I have in the next 5 years is how do people use unstructured time? How can we just be as well as do? But there's that sense of the doing gene. And I think the families who are finding us want everything we've talked about, Chloe. It becomes a virtuous circle. I sometimes have parents say, we're so pleased to be here. And often those who help us on prospective parent days, I've just been telling the prospective parents, all the things that happen. I often say to them, but the school has been made by you. You are the families who've chosen. You're the families who bought into that social mission, this ethos, that educational vision. We've used the word inclusion a lot. And I think inclusion is almost more important than diversity. Diversity can be the tick box. Have you done all these things? Yes. Inclusion is, have you done all these things? And does everyone who's come to you because of those things now feel they are treated equally and valued and respected equally? Only if you can include them in that way have you reached where you want to be. So I'd say come and see us, break down your stereotypes about big schools, break down your stereotypes about day schools, break down your stereotypes about boys' schools, and come and see what we're really like, and then tell us what you think, and we'll get stronger and stronger.
We always recommend as well that the parents visit and also listen to the head. So it's wonderful that we've been able to include you on our Education Corner podcast and perhaps give them a glimpse of Dulwich College from the inside.
Thank you very much, Chloe. Much enjoyed talking to you. Thank you.